afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the MedResults Network Educational Webinar Series. I'm Jamie Parrott, the COO of MedResults Network, and as always, I just want to thank everyone who came out to attend live today. Last week, we held our first of 4 webinars in 4 weeks, and after the webinar, we received some great feedback from our attendees, so I just want to say a special thank you as well to those who attended live last week. And for those of you that may have missed last week's presentation or any of our other presentations in the past, you can always access our webinar recordings on the MedResults Network website under our archived webinars page. That's at www.medresultsnetwork.com. We have a whole list of archived webinars. We're continually growing that list as we move forward with new webinars. And I can't guarantee you that every webinar will be recorded, so if you can't attend, just notify me prior to the presentation. I may be able to help you out with that. Before we begin with today's presentation, I want to remind everyone that we're right in the middle of rebate season. And of course, rebate season for us happens 4 times a year, about a month after the end of each quarter. But what really defines rebate season for us is actually the amount of calls we're getting from members who are just as excited about getting their rebates as we are to send them out. So with that said, we just hit our 30-day mark after the last quarter, and we're going to be in the process of drawing up rebates this week and next. So if you purchase MERS injectable products, including Radius or Bellatero, and you're not already benefiting from their MMS program, you can expect to receive a rebate probably within the next 2 weeks here. And likewise, if you purchased any PCA skin products in the last few months and you hit the $2,000 or the $5,000 mark, you will get a rebate very soon. 2 weeks from now, if you haven't received a rebate and you think you earned one, absolutely don't hesitate to contact us. And we'll track down those rebates that we owe you. Our presentation today is the second of 4 webinars in 4 weeks. Our third presentation next week is very special, as our new CEO, Jeff Rutledge, is presenting on how to maximize every phase of the patient life cycle to increase your earning potential. And as I mentioned last week to our webinar attendees, Jeff's one of the most interesting people I know. You know, I asked everyone, how many people do you know that have a master's in demography? And Jeff is one of those few, I think. And finally, on November 17th, we'll be holding our 4th presentation with special guest Demand Force, where we'll be covering the topic of reputation management. You can register for one, you can register for the next 2, and all of the recordings for these 4 will be available on our website. And speaking of interesting people, today we've invited special guest and industry consultant Jay Shorr to speak on choosing your next laser device. And Jay Shorr, he's the founder and managing partner of the Best Medical Business Solutions. They're a preferred partner and affiliate of MedResults Network and a Florida-based medical practice consulting firm which assists practices with their operational, administrative, and financial health. And as we're nearing the end of the year, we know that many of you are getting ready to make a device purchase, and you want to take advantage of that tax deduction, Section 179. So if you're considering a purchase or you think we'll make one in the next year, you have come to the right presentation. Jay is going to spend the next 30 minutes discussing what to do and what not to do when making your next major equipment investment. And finally, you all have heard this before, but I want to remind you, a 30-second survey will pop up with just a few questions to capture your feedback right after the end of the presentation. And as I mentioned before, we really want your feedback, as that helps us to determine what type of education we're going to present in 2017 during these webinars. So please just take a second to fill this out for us. If you have questions for Jay, we're actually going to open it up for a live Q&A session directly following the event. And if you want more information about the Best Medical Business Solution or today's presentation or the topic, you can also use the survey to let us know. So with that said, I would like to introduce our special guest, Jay Shorr of the Best Medical Business Solutions.
Well, thank you, Jamie. I'm proud to be a part of the MedResult Network. I have known the entire family for many, many years. Having also in our medical practice, having been a member of MedResult Network, I am very aware of all the wonderful savings, and thank you for allowing me to do a presentation today. As Jamie said, as we get towards the end of the year, as we want to take advantage of many of the wonderful savings that might be available, let's determine why we're in this business. So what I'd like to start with is determining what medicine is, because we're in the aesthetic, cosmetic, and plastic surgical industry. And it's not just a matter of seeing patients, it's not just a matter of buying that next device. So I'm going to try and give you 5 different items about what medicine is. And to start with, medicine's a science. And we all know that there are the scientific beauty of what we do in our industry is we heal people. We try to make them looking wonderful, looking young again, because that's what they're asking for when they first come in. But medicine is still one of the most respected professions today, and the reason for that is the amount of time and education that it takes to become a physician, a mid-level practitioner. You have to go through your regular collegiate career, and then you go to medical school. You'll do an internship. You may do a residency. You then may even go in to do a specialized fellowship. And then you come out, and now I've graduated, so now what? So you're able to practice medicine, but never lose sight of the fact that medicine is a business, and it truly has to be treated like the business that it is. Because if you don't, you will be out of business, and why go into something from the start unless you're going to treat it as such? But there are 4 basic priorities and mandatory priorities that you have to have when you run a medical practice. The first is safety. I've always said in our medical practice and the practices that we consult for, safety of your patient and your staff is by far the #1 priority. Secondly, you have to protect those licenses of the providers that perform all of the wonderful services. It could be the physician, it could be the mid-level practitioner like your PA or nurse practitioner, your esthetician, even if your medical assistant, if they are licensed in the particular states or commonwealth in which you practice. Thirdly, have fun. Enjoy what we do. And lastly, the money will follow. The one thing that I can assure you is that if you don't practice the top 3, you will not make money. Now, this next slide states that there's no such things as ordinary people, just poor people. And that's why we have before and after photos from the top who are just our regular, ordinary, everyday patient. But yet, when we are ready to buy a wonderful device, we transform these people into wonderful, beautiful people. Now, it just so happens that this is gender specific for female, but one of the most interesting things today is the inception of male dominance and male beauty in our industry. Between male treatments and transgender treatments, they're probably the most popular things in the market as we speak. So now we have to say, what is your practice's need for your next piece of equipment? Now we know that as we go to all these conferences day in and day out, there's a new box on the market that has alleged efficacious results. That's wonderful. However, some of the problems that we run into, that as soon as we buy a box, a laser, a radio frequency, there's another one right behind it, either level 2 or a competitive piece of equipment claiming to do the same, if not better, in the treatments. And we all know that. We see it in the radio frequency market. We see it in the cryolipolysis market. We see it in the vaginal rejuvenation market, whether it's COT assisted or whether it's radio frequency. Today's presentation, I'm not really going to get into any name brand specific lasers, because that's not what the purpose of this is. Let's assume that every laser does the same thing and there's only one brand, because that's the way I want to speak about it. Because it's not a self-promoted presentation sponsored by a laser company, therefore this is strictly for educational purposes. Now when we want to go buy a piece of equipment, there's several things that we have to figure out. How long has it been on the market? And the reason that you ask this question is because the buzzwords. Everybody knows that when the first cryolipolysis piece of equipment came out, it was the buzzwords. When the first radio frequency first came out, it was the buzzwords. So we want to know, how long has it been on the market? Is it a brand new procedure? Have we not been able to find whether or not its true efficacy is really true in the marketplace? Because we know that when we see all the pretty brochures by the manufacturers and the distributors, they're only going to show you those before and afters that they want you to see. They never actually market whether or not they've had any bad results. Is the equipment safe? And is it effective? Naturally, you only want to buy equipment domestically that's FDA approved. I'm not saying that you can't purchase a piece of equipment that is manufactured overseas. However, it should have gone through its 510K approval and be FDA cleared in the United States. Now, there are plenty of pieces of equipment and supplies that are FDA approved, and we use them off-label. Since I'm not speaking for a laser company, and this is not a CME-approved course, well, you can use pieces of equipment that are FDA approved, and you can use them off-label. It's perfectly legal. You just can't use something that's not FDA approved. The next thing we want to know, who's our competition? And who's offering it in your specific area? Because if it's right, fresh in the marketplace, and you're the first one out of the gate, you're going to be the one that's able to catch all the buzz. But if once you start, the longer it's been on the market, as you well know, the longer it takes, the more people that are in it. So then, what is the going rate for the procedure? When it first starts out, you're able to get a higher rate because no one else is doing it. But when everyone else starts jumping on the bandwagon, your prices have to come down. Now, there are two types of pieces of equipment. There are some that actually have just the box. You're usually priced higher, or sometimes they have consumables or disposables. So they may be priced lower, but you have to pay per procedure because it either has a tip or a grounding pad, something of that sort where you can use them individually by patient, or they have a certain amount of numeric pulses and it pulses out, and you may have to use them for other multiple consumables and disposables for multiple patients. And do you have space in your office? The one thing you don't want is to have your office be laser poor. Secondly, you don't want your office to be so overrun with big boxes of equipment that there's no space for the tables, there's no space for the physician, there's no space for the patient. It looks bad. So you want to make sure that you have a lot of space to perform it, because some are just tabletop pieces of equipment and some are the big boxes. The next thing you want to know, who in your office is going to be able to treat these patients? Not every state has identical laws. For example, in the state of Florida, where I'm from, in our former medical practice, a esthetician or an RN was not allowed to use a laser. The only time that an esthetician was allowed to use a laser was for hair if they had an electrology license. That is not true in every state. For example, in Illinois, a medical assistant under the direction of a doctor can perform some of these procedures. However, an esthetician may not, because under the guidance and the laws of the aesthetic board in the state of Illinois, it's prohibited. So an esthetician cannot go in and treat a patient and acknowledge to the patient that they are an esthetician, because it's in violation of the law. But yet, if they go in and they're acting as a medical assistant under the direction of a doctor who's writing those protocols, they can. So I don't want to get into the legal entanglements. Just be careful. Some states like Florida, you have to be a PA, nurse practitioner, or a physician of allopathic or osteopathic medicine. Lastly, how much pain or discomfort is associated with the treatment? I never like to use the P word, pain, paralyze, as some people say with Botox. That's just a dirty word. It's a four-letter word that just happens to begin with P. We usually like to say it's discomfort. But you know that the more discomfort and or pain associated with the treatment, the less likely a patient may be to want to have a multiple series of patients. And one of the most important things that you have to be considerate of is if you're in the aesthetic cosmetic venue, what does your office look like? What does your reception area look like? Now, this is a true office. I happen to have gone into an office that looked like this, and I took a picture, and they said to me, "What are you taking a picture of?" And it happened to be around the holidays, and I said, "I just love the garland." So I took a picture of it. However, this is not the image of a cosmetic aesthetic practice that you want to give off to your patient. Actually, the physician that owns this practice is a wonderfully successful physician, and they are not in the aesthetic cosmetic market. So now we want to know who in your office determines the piece of equipment that's best for your office. Is it the doctor? Usually it should be. Is it your office or your practice manager? They may have heard that there's a new piece of equipment on the market and they want to do some investigation, but that's okay. They shouldn't be making the decisions. Additional staff, such as medical assistants and your patients, your estheticians, and really your patients might drive the demand, meaning once that is the buzzword is out in the marketplace, they may ask you if you have a specific piece of equipment. No differently than they ask you if you have specific neuromodulators, dermal fillers. Some practices are very limited in what they carry because they don't want to inventory a lot. But when the patient base continues to ask, or the manufacturers that are having great results and your colleagues who are boasting about the wonderful results, it might be time to consider at least trying to either rent a piece of equipment first to see if it fits the need of your practice, or ask some of your colleagues. Well, when is the best time to purchase a piece of equipment? Well, the time in your business's lifespan, if you're getting ready to retire pretty soon, it's not the best time. If you're just starting out and you have a limited budget, we work with physicians that come right out of residency, and we start them with their business plans and work through it. And we also work with physicians that are in the highlight of their careers, and lastly, some that are in their exit strategies. So you have to understand that there are certain times that you shouldn't be purchasing equipment if you don't know that you're going to get the return on your investment. And lastly, in the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you a spreadsheet that's been created that can tell you how many patients, how many treatments, and how much revenue you are going to need in order to at least break even in your analysis. Now, when should you and where should you buy this equipment? When you go to a conference, I know how overwhelming it is. We see dozens, and I mean literally dozens of pieces of equipment. Sometimes they're right next to one another. And as you well know, like other types of vendors, each vendor will try and share with you why theirs is better than that of their competitor. The funny thing is the salesman that might be in that booth, you may have seen that salesperson in the next booth at a previous conference. You have to make a decision where you want to buy it. Do you buy it from another physician? Well, if you're buying it from another physician, the first thing you want to know is why is that physician selling it? How long have they had it? What kind of results do they have? And are they replacing it because they get an upgraded or a new piece of equipment that they can afford, or it just hasn't been of value to them? Do you buy it from a website? Well, when you buy it from a website, from a used third-party vendor, many times you'll get a great deal. However, you never really know the life cycle of that piece of equipment. There are many wonderful, honest, reputable vendors out there that do sell third-party equipment, but be careful because usually the labor, the warranties are not transferable from the time that you first purchase a piece of equipment, and then when you buy it from a third party, it may not be transferable. You may not be able to get service. You may not be able to get parts. And lastly, do you buy it from overseas? I really caution you against that for a multiple reasons. You don't know its history, and sometimes they're non-FDA approved pieces of equipment. When it comes time to thinking about buying a piece of equipment, is this you or is this you? If you don't know what you don't know when it comes time to buying a piece of equipment and have it in your specific plan, it's like having your head in the sand. And when you have your head in the sand and you really don't know, you're going to watch all the money that you've made that's free flowing in your business being sucked up into the air like a vacuum without you being able to do anything about it because you didn't properly make decisions with informed, good information. So now that you determine which piece of equipment is best to you, how do you know that you're getting the best price? In other words, how do you know how to negotiate with vendors? Well, many of you unfortunately do not. You think that you're getting a best deal, but you never really know. Don't be afraid to hire a third party. Is this a commercial plug for me? Well, it's what we do professionally. We'll negotiate any and everything for physicians in their practices because there are certain nuances that you don't know are available, and at the end of the day, we end up going to the final decision maker that can get that good deal. There are 3 components to negotiating. First, you have to listen. And secondly, you've got to educate yourself, and you also have to educate the salesperson about your business, because it's not a build it and they'll come. You don't buy it and the revenue comes right away. And then you need to consult with your accounting team and your staff to find out whether or not this particular piece of equipment is going to fit in your practice. Let's be honest. Anything that you do has 2 components associated with it. The first is income, and the second are expenses. That's a pretty simple formula equation. Hopefully, your income is greater than your expense, and you have to understand the vendor's needs and objectives because it's all about money. Remember, most of the vendors out there are commission type of salespeople. I applaud the vendors and their salespeople because they're selling us these wonderful pieces of equipment. However, it really is all about your needs. Don't be afraid to ask questions of the vendors and insist on answers about the piece of equipment you're going to buy. Because once you sign on the dotted line and you walk away and they walk away, sometimes once you've signed that financial agreement, it's too late. And you may have either left money on the table or found that that particular piece of equipment that you thought was going to solve your wares and your ills is indeed not the equipment that you really need at all. So make sure, think about it. How many times have you walked away from buying something in negotiation and as you leave you say, I forgot to ask this? Write all your questions down prior to meeting with somebody so that you know you cross them off of a list. You know, you have to understand everything that you're doing in negotiating. And Albert Einstein said it perfectly. He says, if you can't explain it simply, you just don't understand it well enough. Now, be sure to keep an eye out for hidden details, such as financing, rebate, returning products. Do you get cooperative advertising? Where does the shipping and handling charges start? Warranties? Are there additional consumables? Do consumables time out? Are they strictly for one patient? Can you use them for multiple patients? What happens if specific things break? What warranty exclusions are there? Be very, very careful. And naturally, can you sell the equipment when the life cycle is over? I never really understood why is it that lasers are the only pieces of equipment that when you want to transfer them and sell them, the warranties don't go with them. I buy a TV, you buy a car, anything that has warranty left over still can sell the warranty with the product. In this particular case, you can't. So make sure that you know, because that also may help if you're able to in the selling price. properly try to prepare and compare the details between the new piece of equipment and all of your other options, including what you already have in your office. You probably have a laser graveyard or an equipment graveyard. Maybe you can trade back some of the equipment that you have in your office already with something else. There are plenty of vendors who want to get the sale. They'll take back old stuff that's been sitting in your, I call it the laser graveyard, to be able to get the sale. All right, now, understand you have to optimize a conversion cascade, because when you buy a piece of equipment, you have to market for it. So when you advertise and you market, that's called the awareness. The awareness, you're trying to create the buzz for people to call you. When people call you, you want to convert them to a consult. And the consult you want to convert to a treatment. And hopefully, if you're doing a package or a series, to a retreatment. And hopefully you can upsell and create other services and create word-of-mouth referral, and then it goes back into the circle again. If you can't create a conversion cascade within your practice, don't buy the equipment. All right? Now, you have to ask the vendor, what else does it do? Is it just for the face? Is it just for the body? Does it have multiple applications? Some may do broad-based lighting. It might be a YAG. It might be an erbium. It might be vascular. It might be IPL. It might be hair. It might be radio frequency. It could be a combination of all of the above or just one modality. So try to figure out what this piece of equipment will do for you. Should you lease it or should you buy it? That all depends on what your finances are. When you buy it, if you want to take advantage of a Section 179, speak with your financial advisor or your accountant, or don't be afraid to hire a third-party consultant. Insist that your piece of equipment that you're buying comes with ongoing training, because you just don't want the box being delivered to your office, uncrated, put together. They give you a 30, 40-minute. Try to get some patients lined up that you actually can do procedures on, and ask them, what type of marketing support do they offer? Not today, but also ongoing. Are you on the physician locator? Don't put that specific on your website so that they can go to that and find other doctors that they can go to. You want it to go right to your landing page. Are they giving you brochures that you can individualize, or are they that's the same brochure that every other practice has? Because when you get the same identical brochures from the manufacturer, it doesn't do anything for your practice. Don't use wasted real estate on brochures. Have your name on it and some of the other wonderful procedures that you do. Make sure that you're able to beat the vendor with your facts against their facts, because your opinions don't matter. They matter to you. All they are opinions. You want to make sure that the facts that you have in your business are the truth, and that you're able to figure out what you need, and I'm going to show you how to figure this out, to optimize and generate revenue to make it profitable. Now, understand your level of authority and your limits, and know when to ask for the highest level. The reason that we have been so successful in helping our clients negotiate is because I don't stop with the general salesperson. It's like going into a car dealer. The worst pain that I go through is going in, trying to negotiate a deal, and the salesman that I'm dealing with does not have the legal authority or the financial authority to cut the final deal. He has to go to his manager, and then they have to go to their manager. Well, when I help negotiate deals, I go to the bottom line person. And this way, I know that that's the last straw that we're able to get, whether it's shipping, extra warranty, additional consumers, or whatever. Insist on putting everything in writing. Don't take anybody's word. I promise you is what you're going to hear. That's right. We do it for all the people. I want to see it in writing. Unless it's in writing, nothing verbal holds up. The only thing that holds up verbally is in poker. not on any type of a legal binding contract. So make sure when you make an agreement with somebody, always get it in writing. And lastly, don't ever be afraid to walk away from the deal. Because what happens here is you're able to have them come back and offer you a secondary negotiation. Don't be afraid to say, I'm not interested, or even better yet, don't be afraid to say, I need to seek the advice of my consultant. Our clients will tell every one of their salespeople the same thing. I'm not allowed to make a decision until I go through my consultant. Think of it this way. The worst thing that can happen is you get the deal that you initially negotiated. That's the worst thing. Now, what I'm going to show you very quickly is something that you really need to know. And it's a spreadsheet that I created, and it looks like this. You want to know, what is your average fee per procedure? So if your average fee per procedure, let's just say it's $1,000, right? You put that $1,000 in here, and what is its actual cost per use for supplies? Let's say the consumable was $250. And what other supplies were there? Well, there was gauze, maybe there was a little bit of lotions here and there, so we'll say it's $25. And how much do you have to pay to the provider, or is it on a commission basis? So if it's a percentage, you put the percentage in here. If it's a dollar figure, let's just say we pay our esthetician $50. So we put that in there. So now we know that our cost is $325 and our gross margin is $675. But what's the cost of the laser? Let's just say the cost of our laser is $125,000. Are you taking a loan, or are you taking it on a lease? So let's say we took it for 48 months at a 7% interest, and that's what the loan was. So we know that our monthly payment's going to be $2,993 or $35,919 per year. Well, what does it cost you to market that laser? Well, let's just say we spend $500 a month to market it, which would be $6,000 a year. That now tells us, let's just say if there's any rent or staffing, we'll leave that blank for now. But what that now tells me, that our acquisition costs and incremental costs are almost $42,000. In order to break even to cover our overhead without putting rent or anything else in there, we need 62 procedures or $62,103 to break even. The reason these numbers are so close is because I made it $1,000. If we made it $1,250, you would see our break-even point is right here, or we need 45 procedures and $56,000 to break even. It's a simple formula equation that we have, and what makes it easy is when you're going to go ahead and create a spreadsheet, or you want to find out how much money you really need to break even, that's probably the most important thing that you want to know. So don't ever be caught thinking that what you think you know is indeed not going to be accurate. That, in a nutshell, in our 30 to 35 minutes, is how to select your new piece of equipment.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. What I'm going to do is I am unmuting everyone that wants to ask a question to Jay. If you do have a question for Jay, and I haven't unmuted, go ahead and ask Jay a question, but it is open for. Do I have a question from anyone that would like to speak with Jay directly? Nope. Okay, we've got a bunch of shy attendees. Well, I just want to Thank everyone. We'll skip the Q&A for now, but if you think of a question that you'd like to ask Jay, we do have that survey that's going to pop up in about a minute. And one thing I want to go back to that Jay, I think you really hit the nail on the head, is asking questions of your vendor is critical. I think one of the most common things we hear from our members is that they don't ask about marketing or ongoing training, and the minute they sign on the dotted line, their rep vanished. That's probably the #1 complaint that we get about device companies. So really keep that in mind. Ask those critical questions. Don't be afraid to do it. And keep in mind, too, MedResults is a lot like Jay in that we've already pre-negotiated for you guys generally the best deals you can get on the equipment vendors that we work with. However, we only work with a few select vendors when it comes to equipment. So hiring a group like Jay's, the Best Medical Business Solutions, that can really help you negotiate with any manufacturer in the industry, not just the ones that we might work with, but anybody that you're considering. So keep that in mind. And like I said, thank you again to Jay. We love the presentation. Thank you again to our attendees. As soon as I shut down the webinar, please take a minute to fill out those simple questions about the webinar today. And also, if you would like to speak with Jay, ask him questions or get some more information, perhaps you're purchasing a device and you need a little assistance or some advice from Jay, you can let us know on that survey. Thank you again. Have a great afternoon, and I will see you all at our next webinar presentation.